Welcome back. Tonight, we're diving into the heart of something truly unsettling, the African coastline after sunset. While millions dream of Africa's pristine beaches and stunning ocean views, there's a darker reality that unfolds when the sun disappears below the horizon. Africa's coastline stretches over 30 kilometers from the Mediterranean shores of Egypt to the windswept beaches of South Africa. By day, it's breathtaking. Golden sands, crystal clear waters, and some of the most spectacular wildlife viewing on Earth. But when darkness falls, this paradise transforms into something far more sinister. What you're about to hear isn't folklore or urban legend. These are verified accounts, documented by authorities, recorded by survivors, and reported by international maritime organizations. These are the stories that tour companies don't advertise, that travel blogs rarely mention, and that most visitors never hear until it's too late. The African coastline harbors dangers that exist nowhere else on Earth. We're talking about the Gulf of Guinea, which has replaced Somalia as the world's most dangerous maritime region. We're talking about waters where pirate attacks have increased by over 300% in recent years, where armed gangs in speedboats hunt for victims under the cover of darkness. But pirates are just the beginning. Africa's coastal waters are home to creatures that have remained virtually unchanged for millions of years. Predators so perfectly adapted to killing that they've earned reputations as the continent's most efficient killers. Nile crocodiles that attack with a bite force of 600 kilopascals, nearly 3 times stronger than a lion's jaw. These reptiles kill more humans annually than all other crocodilian species combined. Then there are the hippos, Africa's true silent killers. Despite their deceptively docile appearance, these 4-ton behemoths are responsible for more human fatalities than lions, leopards, and elephants combined. When hippo attacks do occur, the likelihood of human death ranges from 55% to 87%, making them statistically more lethal than encounters with any other large African animal. But perhaps the most chilling aspect isn't the animals or the pirates, it's how quickly paradise can turn deadly. One moment you're watching a gorgeous African sunset over calm waters, and the next moment you're fighting for your life in a nightmare that feels impossible to escape. The stories you're about to hear happen to real people. Tour guides with decades of experience, fishermen who knew these waters like their own backyard, tourists who thought they were safe, business travelers who made one wrong decision at the wrong time. Each story follows a pattern. People who underestimated the dangers that emerge when the African sun sets. People who thought their experience, their caution, or their luck would protect them. People who learned too late that in Africa, the coastline doesn't forgive mistakes. So why are we telling you this? Because knowledge can save your life. Because understanding these dangers doesn't mean you can't explore Africa's incredible coastline. It means you'll do it the right way, at the right time, with the right precautions. What you're about to hear will change how you think about coastal Africa forever. These aren't just horror stories, they're warnings, lessons written in blood and trauma by those who survived to tell the tale and remembered by those who didn't make it home. The African coastline after sunset is not just dangerous, it's unforgiving, and once you hear these stories, you'll understand why locals whisper a simple rule that every visitor should know. When the African sun sets on the water, the wise go inland. Let's begin with what happened off the coast of Nigeria, where the Gulf of Guinea has earned its reputation as the world's new piracy hotspot. The Gulf of Guinea stretches from Senegal to Angola, covering over 60 kilometers of coastline. In 2019, the West African coast saw nearly 100 piracy attacks, with a nearly 20% increase in incidents during the first quarter of 2020 alone. But behind these statistics are real stories. Stories like what happened to Captain Ripasad Prasad and his crew aboard the MV Duke. It was 7:40 a.m. when the chief officer called Captain Prasad to his quarters. A boat was following them. This wasn't unusual in these waters. Fishing vessels often appeared on the horizon. But something felt wrong. The small boat was moving with purpose, cutting through the waves with an intensity that made the crew nervous. The raids off the West African coast invariably follow the same pattern. At night or in the early hours of the morning, a flotilla of pirate dinghies or speedboats fans out across the water heading off in the direction of their prey, an oil tanker or cargo vessel, which they then attack and board. Captain Prasad had been sailing these waters for 15 years. He knew the risks. Every maritime briefing warned of the Gulf of Guinea's transformation from a peaceful trading route into what experts now call the world's most dangerous maritime region. Unlike pirates along Somalia's coast, who are often only after ransom, pirates in West Africa also steal goods, particularly oil, and many attacks end up with crew members injured or killed. The attack came swift and brutal. Multiple speedboats surrounded the MV Duke, filled with armed men wielding AK-47s. These weren't desperate fishermen driven to piracy by poverty. These were organized criminal groups with sophisticated equipment and military-style tactics. They knew exactly what they were doing, Captain Prasad later told investigators. They had communication equipment, GPS devices, weapons that looked military-grade. This wasn't some random attack, it was a coordinated operation. Nigeria's geography makes for easy flight. Pirates conceal boats and stolen commodities in the thousands of inlets, rivers and mangroves that comprise Nigeria's coast. Crude oil is unloaded to criminal partners and resold on the local market through government and non-government facilitators. The pirates didn't just steal cargo, they took hostages. Captain Prasad and several crew members were forced into the speedboats and taken to a hidden camp deep in the Niger Delta. The conditions were horrific. They were kept in makeshift shelters with no medical care, minimal food, and constant threats of violence. The camp where Prasad and his crew were being held had very sparse amenities, according to the investigation report. For 3 weeks, they endured psychological torture while their captors negotiated ransom demands. Pirates consider it a softer crime than drug trafficking, with less severe punishment for offenders, but the reality for victims is anything but soft. What makes these attacks particularly terrifying is their increasing sophistication. Recent attacks suggest an escalation in both scale and sophistication, with jihadist insurgents launching major assaults, including incidents involving 100 militants attacking military installations. These aren't just pirates. Many groups have connections to larger criminal networks and terrorist organizations. The psychological impact on survivors is devastating. Many crew members who survive these attacks never return to sea. They describe nights filled with nightmares, the sound of speedboat engines triggering panic attacks, and an inability to feel safe even on land. Consider the case of the Chinese fishing vessels Hai Lufeng 13 and Hai Lufeng 14. The vessels were transiting the Wari River in tandem when they were approached by armed pirates in several speedboats. Members of the Cameroon military were said to be aboard the fishing vessels and engaged the pirates in gunfire, with one pirate likely killed. But the attacks didn't stop there. Approximately an hour later, a Panama-registered general cargo ship was also reportedly attacked in the same area, with 6 crew members abducted. These coordinated attacks show the level of organization and ruthlessness that has made the Gulf of Guinea so dangerous. The economic impact is staggering. In some cases, affected countries in West Africa have become less concerned with direct losses from piracy than with the ways in which these losses affect international insurance rates and other trade-related costs. In Benin, for example, taxes on trade account for half of government revenue, and 80% of these are derived from the port of Cotonou. For local fishing communities, the situation has become a nightmare. Fishermen who have worked these waters for generations now face an impossible choice: risk their lives to feed their families or abandon their traditional livelihoods entirely. Many fishing villages report that their young men have stopped going out after sunset, effectively cutting their fishing time in half and devastating their communities. The most chilling aspect is how pirates have adapted their tactics. They use insider information, sometimes from port workers or shipping agents, to target the most valuable vessels. They employ GPS tracking and sophisticated communication networks. Some groups even use maritime traffic apps to monitor ship movements and plan attacks with military precision. What happened to Captain Prasad and his crew represents just one incident among hundreds that go unreported each year. The full scale of piracy in the Gulf of Guinea remains hidden because many shipping companies refuse to report attacks, fearing it will increase their insurance premiums or damage their reputation. As we'll see in our next story, the waters themselves hold dangers even more ancient and deadly than modern pirates. The Zambezi River winds through some of Africa's most spectacular landscape, but beneath its seemingly calm surface lurks one of the continent's most efficient killers. This is the story of what happened to extreme kayaker Hendry Coetzee and his team, a tragedy that illustrates how quickly Africa's waterways can turn deadly. For weeks, 3 kayakers, exploring a series of rivers through the heart of Africa, came together in a close formation designed to ward off hippo and crocodile attacks whenever they paddled. The quiet green glides between thundering stretches of white water. Hendry Coetzee was a legend in the extreme kayaking community. He had navigated some of the world's most dangerous rivers and was considered one of the most knowledgeable guides on African waterways. The team, two Americans, Chris Corbulich and Ben Stukersbury, and Coetzee, had traveled some 10 miles of river through dense concentrations of man-killing wildlife. They knew the risks. Coetzee had spent months teaching them African river survival techniques, tapping their boats to make noise, staying out of eddies where hippos might attack, and keeping clear of banks where crocodiles sunned themselves. He wanted to take us from the snow-capped peaks into the deepest, darkest, steamiest jungle, said Stukersbury. He wanted to prove to us that in this place considered by Western media as one of the most dangerous places on Earth, we would find some of the nicest, most hospitable people we ever met. But on that quiet stretch of the Lukuga River in Congo, all the preparation in the world couldn't prevent what happened next. They were paddling just 4 or 5 feet apart when a crocodile slipped up from behind and ripped trip leader Hendry Coetzee from his red plastic boat. With no time to do anything but say, "Oh my God," Coetzee was gone, hauled beneath the green water, never to be seen again. The crocodile just pulled him right underwater, Chris Corbulich told the Associated Press. The attack was so sudden, so completely unexpected, that even Coetzee, with all his experience and knowledge, had no chance to react. This wasn't an isolated incident. The Nile crocodile is estimated to kill hundreds, possibly thousands of people each year, which is more than all other crocodilian species combined. One study posited the number of attacks by Nile crocodiles per year as 275 to 745, of which 63% are fatal. What makes crocodile attacks particularly horrifying is their prehistoric efficiency. These animals have remained virtually unchanged for 200 million years because they're perfectly designed killers. Since the majority of fatal attacks are believed to be predatory in nature, the Nile crocodile can be considered the most prolific predator of humans among wild animals. Consider the case of Gustave, perhaps the most famous man-eating crocodile in Africa. Gustave is rumored to have killed as many as 200 to 300 people, though one more recent estimate states the true figure is probably 60 people or fewer. He has obtained a mythical status and is greatly feared by the people in the region. Scientists who have studied Gustave claim that his uncommon size and weight impede his ability to hunt the usual agile prey of Nile crocodiles such as fish, antelope and zebra, forcing him to attack larger animals such as hippopotamus, buffalo and humans. What's most terrifying about Gustave is that despite frequently being referred to as a man-eater, a popular local warning says he often leaves his victims' corpses uneaten, suggesting he kills not just for food, but because he can. The reality of crocodile attacks is far more brutal than most people imagine. These aren't quick deaths. Crocodiles employ a technique called the death roll, grabbing their prey and spinning rapidly to disorient and drown their victim. The experience is described by survivors as being trapped in a washing machine filled with knives. Brian Dempster, one of the first commercial crocodile hunters, witnessed the feeding behavior that makes these animals so terrifying. A feeding pair would seize the hippo and somersault backwards, tearing chunks loose and devouring them with a series of swallows as another pair moved in to feed. There was no fighting among them, just a morbid reptilian ritual of waiting, moving in to feed, and retiring back to consume. The hunting methods of Nile crocodiles are particularly insidious. They can remain motionless for hours, looking like floating logs, before striking with explosive speed. Even the smallest waterhole can support a croc or two. One afternoon, a naturalist snuck up on what looked like a puddle of about 10 feet across and possibly 18 inches deep, where 2 reptilian eyes and a mean little snout faced the other way. At the sound of the camera shutter, the water erupted so quickly he nearly fell over backwards. For fishing communities along Africa's rivers and coasts, crocodile attacks are an ever-present threat. Many attacks occur at night when people come to collect water or when fishermen are setting their nets in pre-dawn darkness. The attacks are swift, silent, and usually fatal. Local communities have developed elaborate warning systems and rituals to protect themselves, but the reality is stark. When a large Nile crocodile decides to attack, there's very little a human can do to survive. The animals can grow up to 20 feet long and weigh over 20 pounds, with jaws capable of generating bite forces that dwarf those of great white sharks. The psychological impact on communities living with these predators is profound. Parents keep children away from any body of water. Fishermen work in groups and maintain constant vigilance. Even something as basic as collecting water becomes a life-threatening activity. What makes these attacks even more disturbing is their unpredictability. Unlike other predators that might give warning signals, crocodiles attack from ambush, often taking victims who never see them coming. The attack on Henry Coetzee, an expert who knew African waters better than almost anyone, demonstrates that experience and preparation offer no guarantee of safety when facing these ancient killers. But as our next story will show, even the seemingly gentle giants of Africa can become deadly predators under the right circumstances. They look like oversized pool toys. Their cartoon-like appearance has made them beloved by children and featured in countless animated movies. But the common hippopotamus is actually one of Africa's most efficient killers, responsible for more human deaths than lions, leopards, and elephants combined. This is the story of George Mwara, a fisherman whose encounter with these deceptively dangerous animals ended in tragedy, and reveals why experts consider hippos to be Africa's deadliest large mammal. George Mwara went fishing with his close friend Babu along the swampy shores of Lake Naivasha in central Kenya. Babu was a quiet guy, a nice guy, Mwara recalled. He's the one who taught me patience, and he was quite good at fishing. Lake Naivasha had become increasingly dangerous due to rising water levels that brought hippos closer to human settlements. They couldn't afford a boat, so they'd wade into the water up to their chests to see what fish, tilapia, carp, catfish had swum into their nets overnight. We had a lucky catch that day, Mwara said. But before we got the full catch, the hippo came again. Babu always told me hippos are dangerous animals, Mwara said. Hippos had attacked Babu 4 times, but he had always managed to escape. But the 5th one, he did not make it. The statistics surrounding hippo attacks are staggering. Scientists estimate that between 29 and 87% of hippo attacks are fatal. You'd have a better chance of surviving a shark attack, a crocodile encounter, and magnitudes better odds at surviving a grizzly bear attack. By some estimates, about 40 people, mostly fishermen, were attacked by hippos on Lake Naivasha in 2020, and as many as 14 of them died. Every year across Africa, hippos kill an estimated 500 people, making them the world's deadliest mammal, after humans, and nearly twice as deadly as lions. What makes hippos so dangerous is their deceptive nature. Hippopotamuses are herbivores and rarely bother other animals, but males can become aggressive if they sense danger. Mothers may attack to protect their young, and nearly all hippos become nervous when something or someone stands between them and the water where they live. The physical capabilities of hippos are terrifying. Although they can weigh up to 4 tons, they can run up to 20 miles per hour. Their jaws can open to 180 degrees, clamp down with a force 10 times that of human jaws, and their lower canines can grow to more than 1.5 feet long. The case of Paul Templar, a Zimbabwe safari guide, illustrates just how quickly a hippo encounter can turn deadly. Paul Templar was 28 and conducting tours in his native Zimbabwe with a focus on photographic safaris. He was leading a group down the Zambezi River when they encountered a pod of about a dozen hippos. We were getting closer, and I was trying to take evasive action. The idea was, let's just paddle safely around the hippos. But the 3rd canoe had fallen back from the group and was off the planned course. Suddenly, there's this big thud, and I see the canoe, like the back of it, catapulted up into the air. Templar survived, but his injuries were catastrophic. The hippo had essentially crushed him, breaking multiple bones and causing internal injuries that required numerous surgeries and years of recovery. Medical experts who treat hippo attack victims describe injuries unlike those from any other animal attack. Medical specialists recommend that hippo-inflicted injuries be considered a special group of animal attacks, classified as major trauma rather than mammalian bites. Indeed, the bite force of the common hippo is 12,600 kPa, relative to that of a lion at 4,500 kPa. Dr. Wabomba, who treats hippo attack victims in Kenya, describes the horrific nature of these injuries. Some of his bowels were sticking out, Wabomba said about one victim. We repaired what could be repaired. This is what we call damage control surgery. He estimates that 40% of the hippo victims he sees ultimately die. The problem is compounded by the remote locations where attacks occur. Such injuries require immediate attention, but often victims don't arrive for hours. Fishermen have to wait until it's safe to retrieve the victim. When the hippo moves away, then transport the injured man to the hospital. The closest hospital might be only 5 miles from the attack site, but it could be 24 miles along rough roads from the far side of the lake. What's particularly disturbing about hippo attacks is their seemingly random nature. On land, it appears that many incidents are accidental, where people encounter hippos and the animals then attack. Hippos may, however, be provoked into an attack when people attempt to drive them from crops. The case of Hassan Semugoma from Uganda demonstrates how persistent these attacks can be. Hassan Semugoma, 33, was mauled to death at the third altercation with the large aquatic mammals while out tending to his farm. The deceased had faced aggression from a hippo twice before, narrowly escaping with his life each time, but it was a third time tragic. Even more terrifying are attacks on boats, which can happen without warning. A toddler died and 23 people went missing when a boat ferrying more than 30 villages across the Shire River in Malawi's Nsanje district was attacked by a hippo, causing it to overturn. The water was infested with crocodiles and hippos. It is too dangerous because the river is too shallow. And in this river, there are crocodiles that most of the time attack people and also hippopotamus that cause incidents like the one we're dealing with, police spokesperson Agnes Zalakoma said. The increasing frequency of hippo attacks is attributed to climate change and human encroachment on hippo habitats. Floods and the economic fallout from COVID-19 are pitting hungry fishermen against hungry hippos with deadly results. Heavy rains have caused lakes to rise, bringing hippos closer to human settlements, leading to an increase in attacks. For coastal communities across Africa, hippos represent a constant threat that locals have learned to live with through generations of hard-earned wisdom. But for visitors unfamiliar with these animals' true nature, the danger is exponentially higher. The tragedy of hippo attacks is their preventability. Most occur because people underestimate the danger or don't recognize the warning signs. When a hippopotamus opens its mouth wide like this, that's a signal to get away as fast as possible. But as our final story will show, sometimes even recognizing danger isn't enough when the African coastline decides to claim another victim. The sun was setting over Victoria Falls as American tourist Pristine and her husband prepared for what should have been the highlight of their African adventure. They had booked a sunset canoe trip on the Zambezi River, one of the most popular tourist activities in Zimbabwe. What happened next would serve as a brutal reminder that Africa's most beautiful locations can also be its most dangerous. While canoeing with her husband on the Zambezi River in Victoria Falls, Zimbabwe, on Saturday morning, Christine Yaldor, 37, was attacked by a hippo. Following the attack, she was airlifted to a hospital in South Africa for treatment. The attack occurred in broad daylight, in one of Zimbabwe's most heavily toured areas, with professional guides present. This wasn't a case of inexperienced tourists wandering into dangerous territory. This was what millions of visitors do every year without incident, until it wasn't. They came too close to the hippo and it panicked and attacked their boat, a witness told the Sunday News. The woman was injured on her right leg in the process. What makes this incident particularly significant is how it demonstrates the unpredictable nature of African coastal and riverine dangers. Victoria Falls is considered one of the safest tourism destinations in Africa, with extensive safety protocols and experienced guides. Yet even in this controlled environment, the wild nature of Africa can assert itself with devastating consequences. The Zambezi River represents many of the dangers we've discussed throughout this series rolled into one waterway. It's home to large populations of both hippos and crocodiles, experiences regular pirate activity in its lower reaches, and connects to coastal areas plagued by maritime crime. For tourists, it offers a false sense of security. The stunning beauty masks very real dangers. Zimbabwe National Parks and Wildlife Management Authority spokesperson Tinashe Farawo's response to the incident was telling. Farawo reiterated that hippos, like all wild animals, can be dangerous and people should avoid contact with them even if they appear docile. But this advice highlights a fundamental problem with African coastal tourism. The entire appeal of visiting these areas is getting close to wildlife and experiencing the raw beauty of untouched nature. Yet that very proximity is what creates the danger. Consider the broader context of Victoria Falls as a tourist destination. Victoria Falls is along the border of Zimbabwe and Zambia and one of Africa's most famous tourist towns. Along with a view of the cascading waterfall, Victoria Falls gives tourists the opportunity to see wild animals such as elephants and rhinos on safari and enjoy local cuisine and shopping. This commercialization of wilderness creates a dangerous illusion of safety. Tourists arrive expecting a controlled, theme park-like experience, but they're actually entering one of the world's most dangerous ecosystems. The same waters that provide stunning photo opportunities are home to predators that have been killing efficiently for millions of years. The medical response to Yaldor's attack reveals another layer of danger for tourists in remote African locations. She had to be airlifted to South Africa for proper medical treatment, a stark reminder that when things go wrong in remote areas of Africa, you're often hours away from adequate medical care. This delay in medical treatment has proven fatal in numerous cases. Such injuries require immediate attention, but often victims don't arrive for hours. The closest hospital might be only 5 miles from the attack site, but it could be 24 miles along rough roads. The tourism industry's response to these dangers has been largely inadequate. While guides provide basic safety briefings, few tourists truly understand the statistical reality of what they're facing. You'd have a better chance of surviving a shark attack, a crocodile encounter, and magnitudes better odds at surviving a grizzly bear attack than a hippo encounter. The problem is compounded by the economic pressure on local communities to downplay dangers. Tourism is often the primary source of income for these communities, and emphasizing the very real risks could devastate local economies. This creates a situation where the people most knowledgeable about the dangers have the strongest incentive to minimize them. Recent incidents throughout Africa show this pattern repeating. In September, a 49-year-old German woman was trampled to death by an elephant at Manaples National Park in Zimbabwe. Another man, identified as Frank Sternhardt, 56, was walking to his hotel in Victoria Falls when he was attacked by an elephant. These aren't isolated incidents, they're part of a pattern of tourists underestimating African wildlife and coastal dangers. The combination of stunning beauty, aggressive marketing by tourism operators, and inadequate risk communication creates a perfect storm for tragedy. The maritime component adds another layer of danger. The same coastal areas that attract tourists for their beauty are increasingly plagued by piracy and maritime crime. Since November 2023, there have been 133 reported incidents in African waters, including 14 vessels struck by missiles or drones and 18 vessels hijacked by pirates. What happened to Christine Yaldor could happen to any of the thousands of tourists who visit African coastal areas every year. Her case illustrates a fundamental truth about traveling along the African coastline, the same factors that make it breathtakingly beautiful. The untamed wildlife, the pristine waterways, the lack of development are exactly what make it potentially deadly. The lesson isn't that people shouldn't visit Africa's stunning coastlines and waterways. The continent offers some of the most incredible experiences on Earth, but visitors need to understand that they're entering a genuinely wild environment where the margin for error is razor thin and the consequences of mistakes can be fatal. The African coastline after sunset isn't just more dangerous, it's exponentially more dangerous. The cover of darkness emboldens both human predators and wildlife. Pirates launch their attacks under cover of night, hippos leave the safety of deep water to graze on land, crocodiles become more active. Even seemingly safe activities like beach walks become potentially lethal. For those who choose to experience Africa's coastal beauty, the key is respect. Respect for the environment, respect for the wildlife, and respect for the wisdom of local communities who have learned to coexist with these dangers over generations. Because in Africa, the coastline doesn't forgive ignorance, arrogance, or simple bad luck. And when the African sun sets over those stunning waters, paradise truly does become predator.